Hello, this is Eric from labofcoding.com. In the last video, we looked at how to use the Django ORM in our project. And in this video, we're going to pick up from that and we are going to introduce Django web pages. So far, we've been looking at the internals of Django and how to use things in the background, but we've not created any web page that our user can visit in our Django project. So in this video, we are going to look on how we are going to do that. So first of all, I've created a simple file here, a simple diagram, which I think simplifies the process of how Django serves a request when someone makes a request to our Django powered site. So assume we have a user who makes a request to our Django site. So when a request comes in, Django will usually load a URLs config file, which is known as the URL config. If you go to settings and to do settings.py, you'll find that there is a root URL config file. So this is the file that Django will load, and it will use this file to determine how to serve the given request. So the root URL config usually points to the urls.py file in the project dir. So if we go to that file, you'll find that there is a list of path objects. So when the request comes in, Django will load the root URL config file, which is this urls.py. And when it loads it, it will look for a URLs pattern. It will look for this list, and it will loop through the list, comparing the path that the user has visited with each path, with each first argument, in this case admin. So it will loop through the list from top to down, and when it sees the first match, it will call the corresponding Django view. Django views are just simple functions which receive a HTTP request object and returns HTTP response objects. We also have Django class-based views, but as a beginning, we'll start looking how to use the class-based views. So, for example, when a user comes, hits your Django project and they visit the admin URL, Django will load the URLs patterns list, and it will loop through it top down. And on finding the first match, it will call the Django view for that path. And it is the Django view which will do the actual work of serving the user. So when Django finds a matching URL in your URLs patterns list, it will call the associated view for that path. And in the view, it's where you will have logic. For example, if you want to fetch some data in the database, for example, you want to display the to-dos that have been saved, you'll use the ORM to hit your database and fetch that data, and then you will pass that data into templates. Templates in this case are the HTTP files that you use in your web pages. So the view will handle this, and then it will return the HTTP response that will serve the user. Some people have referred to Django as an MVC framework. That is a framework which follows the MVC architecture. MVC here stands for Model View Controller, which is an architectural pattern that has been used in many software systems. Maybe if you don't know what MVC is, M stands for model, V stands for view, and C stands for controller. So if you have a software system which follows this architecture, you will have the model which deals with the data, the storage and access of data, and so forth. And then you'll have the view which deals with how you display that data to the end user or to the client. And the controller, this is like the glue between the view and the model. It handles how data is accessed from the model and passed to the view. So if we consider Django as an MVC framework, we will have the Django models and ORM as the model part of the MVC, because it deals with storage and access of the data. And we will have the templates, which are the HTML pages that Django uses, as the view, because it's the one which deals with how that data is displayed to the end user. And we will have the URLs and views both to form the C part, the controller part. So both the Django views and URLs will form the C part of the MVC pattern. So as you may have noticed, the Django views are actually not the view part of the MVC framework. So that's something you have to take note of. So the Django models, the model part, templates, that is the view part, and the URLs and views, that's the controller part of it. So now let's drop into Django and create our first Django view. In every Django application, there is usually a views.py file. That's where you create your Django views. So in our main app, we have a views.py file. So this is where we'll be creating our Django views. For now, we'll create a simple function-based view. A function-based view, as I mentioned earlier, is just a normal Python function which receives a HTTP request object and returns a HTTP response object. So let's create our first Django view. Let's remove everything. So let's call our view function index, and it receives a request object and it returns a HTTP response object. We'll have to import the HTTP response object from Django's HTTP module. So that will be from Django.http import HTTP response. So our view will return that object, the HTTP response object. And there is this HTTP response object. You can pass just a normal string, and Django will be able to return the response. So for now, let's just pass a hello world string to our HTTP response object and return that. So let's return HTTP response, and let's just pass the string hello world for now. Oops. Sorry. Okay, let's save that. Yeah, so we have created our Django view. So when you create your Django view, the next thing is usually to register it in a urls.py file, so that Django can know of it. And also when Django is looking through the URLs, it can know which view to use for that given request. So if we go to do's urls.py, you'll find that there are some instructions here that we can use to register our view. So we could even import our view from main into this place and include it in the list of URL patterns. But instead of that, Django advises that you should have another urls.py in each of your app, which declares its own set of URLs, and include that one in your URLs patterns in the root URL config, which is to-dos urls.py. So instead of registering our view here, we will create a urls.py file in our main app and register it there, and then include those URLs in the root URL config. So let's go to main and create the new file urls.py. So the way you register your views, you just follow the normal way that Django has registered the admin URLs here. So let's we can copy this one because it's almost what we will need here. So in this case, we are going to register our our index view, which we have declared here. So we can move this one and let's register our index view. So first of all, we will have to import it. So let's say from .views import index. So the path instance, it usually takes 4 arguments. The first one is what we call a route. The next one is the view that you want to register. The next one are keyword arguments which will be passed to the view, and the last one is the name. So the first and the second are mandatory. The next to the keyword arguments and name are usually they're not mandatory, but for example, the keyword arguments, if you don't use keyword arguments in your view, that's fine. But for the name, it's usually a name that can be used to identify that given view. So it usually becomes very handy in several other places. We will see how we'll use the name. But for now, let's just pass the route and the view in our path instance. So the route is usually the string that will be used when rendering that view in the browser. That's the path that will be used, the URL path that will be used. So let's just call our route index and let's pass the view. In this case, our view is index. So we have registered this view here. So now we have to include the URLs in our main app in the URL and the root URL config, which is todos urls.py. So Django gives instructions here how you can go about that. So you will register that view in your app. In our case, we have registered our view in the main app, and then you will import those URLs in your app into this file, which is the root URL config. So let's do that. So Django has a function called include, which you can use to include your URLs. So let's pass path, and we want to give any string for any the route for this one will be just an empty string, and then we will use the include to include the URLs in our main app. So that will be include main.urls. So now we have registered our main URLs. In this case, we have only one view, which is the index view. So after you have registered your URLs, you can try to access them in the browser and see if everything is working fine. So our project is running here, and we have registered our index URL and given it the path index. So that is the path that you will use in the URL. So let's go to our browser here and visit localhost. So the path that we have given is index. So let's visit that, hello world. So Django has been able to render this view, and it has returned the string that we gave, hello world. So that is how you normally create and register your views in Django. The process is usually just the same. You create a urls.py file in your app, and then you register all your views in that file, and then you include it in the URLs in the root URL config. Yeah, so that's it. We have created our first Django view, and we are going to pick up from that in the next video. Thanks for watching.